Good morning. Welcome to Business 360, where business, markets, and the economy come into full view. I'm Margaux Salcedo, and this is the Bilyonaryo News Channel. The death toll from the southwest monsoon and tropical cyclones climbs, while agricultural damage swells past 135 million pesos. The government's proposed 7.2 trillion peso budget for 2027 is set to be formally transmitted to Congress today. And Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Eli Remolona signals less pressure to hike rates after the economy's slowest growth in years. BSP Deputy Governor Zeno Ronald Abenoja joins us straight ahead. The death toll from the southwest monsoon and tropical cyclones Maymay and Luis has risen to 16. Most of the deaths were confirmed by police regional offices, many of them caused by landslides and drowning. State Weather Bureau Pag-asa also says La Mesa Dam has breached its spilling level, raising the risk of flooding in low-lying areas of Quezon City and parts of Metro Manila. The storms have also taken a toll on the farm sector. Agricultural damage from tropical cyclones Luis and Maymay and the southwest monsoon has climbed past 135 million pesos. The Department of Agriculture says the storms hit more than 6,000 farmers and wiped out over 4,500 hectares of farmland across 5 regions. The agency adds that the figure could still rise. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chiu Laurel Jr. has ordered his offices to speed up aid to farmers, particularly insurance claims and credit support. The Department of Budget and Management is set to submit the 7.2 trillion peso 2027 National Expenditure Program or NEP to Congress today. Yesterday, the DBM submitted the NEP to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The Marcos cabinet approved the program last month, with spending directed at education, healthcare, livelihoods, and security. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas says the economy's sharp slowdown has taken some of the pressure off another interest rate hike this month. But Governor Eli Remolona Jr. makes clear another hike is still possible. Asked directly if weaker growth has eased the pressure to raise rates, Remolona answered yes. But the governor says the BSP has not decided anything ahead of its August 27 meeting. Quote, "Everything is possible. Everything is on the table." He says the data remains, quote, "not clear." And he stresses price stability is still the priority, vowing to tighten, quote, "as much as necessary to bring inflation back to target." At this point, let's bring in BSP Deputy Governor Zeno Ronald Abenoja. Good morning, DG.
Good morning, Margaux.
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here, especially because we also have much about the economy to talk about, not just inflation. I'd like our audiences to also know that DG Abenoja was also the chief economist of the Department of Finance before becoming deputy governor at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So we had the inflation rates announced last Wednesday, and then the GDP rates announced last Friday, and our inflation has been steadily going down from April 7.2% down to 6.4%, and it's now at 6.2%. This has been taken as good news by some, but there was an announcement, a statement coming from the BSP governor that he does not really consider this a sustainable downward trend. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, thank you, Margaux. So we are looking at inflation numbers. The number that you have mentioned is what's called the headline inflation. It's a very volatile inflation indicator in certain periods, especially when there are a lot of shocks and uncertainty. Indeed, as you've mentioned, we've come down. The past 3 inflation peaks have been showing some downward trend. But moving forward, there could be still other factors that could put pressures on inflation numbers. We have said before that we are looking at the impact of oil, international oil prices. Oil prices abroad continue to be volatile and elevated. Another factor that we are looking at is the El Nino phenomenon. And as many have mentioned, there are some predictions that this could be the worst type of El Nino, so-called Godzilla El Nino. But this is a slow burn type of shock because we could see it coming a few months ahead. And so measures are being undertaken by the government to address precisely the possible impact of El Nino on inflation. So we are looking at these different factors to see where headline inflation might be going in the rest of the year as well as in the next 2 years. But
everyone's anticipating, DG, the August 27 meeting, whether or not the BSP is going to increase rates again. However, it was announced last Friday that GDP is now at 2.3%. Does this also factor in?
Yeah, we look at a lot of numbers. We continue to emphasize on inflation numbers moving forward. If I can share, Margaux, the governor and the monetary board looks at a lot of numbers on inflation. Aside from headline inflation, we look at what is called the core inflation, or what's...
But the core inflation, sir, also went down, 4.4 in June and 4.2 in July.
Yes, that's right. So we have our inflation target at 3%, plus minus 1%, and both headline inflation as well as core inflation continue to be elevated, higher or above than the tolerance range of up to 4%. So that is something that we continue to assess, where core inflation could be moving forward, if there's still a momentum or underlying price pressures moving forward. Equally important are other indicators of inflation. The monetary board looks at the what's called also the bottom 30% inflation. This is the inflation being faced by the lower income segments of our society, and that remains at around 8%.
In fact, it increased. It's the one that increased from 8 in June to 8.2 in July.
That's right. So if you look at the last 3 months, it's been hovering around 8%, despite the headline inflation trending downward. So that's also one thing that we look at very closely.
Ito po ba, sir, yung dahilan kung bakit sinasabi ng taong bayan na hindi nila nararamdaman kahit na yung inflation, it seems na bumababa, hindi pa rin nararamdaman ng taong bayan, nahihirapan pa rin silang bumili ng mga goods, kaya po yung sa lower 30%, dahil tumaas yung from 8 to 8.2, yun yung totoong inflation na nararamdaman nila. Yun po ba yun?
So that measure helps us distinguish precisely the different experiences of our population, because we have different consumption baskets. For example, for the bottom 30%, food inflation or food component is much higher than the typical Filipino household. For example, to give a specific illustration, if you look at rice, the average rice share in the basket is about 9%. But for the bottom 30, it's twice as that. It's 18%. So there could be different experiences. And so we are looking at all these different measures ourselves at the BSP and even the economic managers.
In fact, the rice inflation increased from 15% in June to 17% in July. Coming now, the Department of Budget and Management just said they had just submitted to the President yesterday the 2027 National Expenditure Program and today to Congress. What do you think can they do in terms of expenditures to help bring down the inflation rates for rice?
Yes. So on the part of the government, what we have seen so far is that they have been focused on initiating that response to El Nino, because one of the more pressing issues is to anticipate the impact on agriculture and then subsequently on food prices moving forward. And so there have been plans to prop up or to support the agriculture sector. That's one thing. And if you look at the budget, traditionally the budget emphasizes education and health, but they also focus on agriculture And agriculture would impact the CPI, the larger component of the CPI, the food section. So that will be important, the support for agriculture, given that we are facing a possible El Nino. The peak impact is probably, based on the scientists, fourth quarter of this year and the first half of next year. So those preparatory work are very important for inflation.
In terms of consumption, one thing, we had Monetary Board member Ben Jokno, former Central Bank Governor Ben Jokno here, and he told us that OFW remittances is at a low and it's quite worrisome now. What do you think would be the effect of this? Is it already reflected now in terms of, I guess, consumption in the GDP, and how can our inflation rates help address this?
So right now, if you look at remittances, it's hovering a little less than 3% growth rate over the past few months. There has been some slowdown in some corridors. That's understandable given what's happening abroad. But it continues to grow, and that's a positive sign. That's a source of resilience, actually, for the economy, the remittances, as well as the BPO revenues. So the fight against inflation will be important moving forward for consumption. Remittances will partly play a role. Also, the inflation numbers. That's why we continue to focus on making sure that we go back to inflation within the next 2 years, if we can.
Another thing that brought down our growth rates was the lack of investor confidence, and we can also see in the numbers that investments went down 9.2%. What can we do to address and increase our FDIs?
Yeah. So if we look at foreign direct investments, there's been a slowdown this year. That is partly because of the challenging external environment. Very uncertain environment with the oil price, with the volatility in financial markets. Also, the advanced economies adjusting their policies, both on the monetary policy and some jurisdictions, the trade policy continue to also shift. And so that's understandable that the FDI may moderate a bit.
Is it really external, DG? There are some who also say that it might be an impact of the flood control scandal and lack of investor confidence because of the cost of corruption.
Yeah, so for us to sustain this interest from foreign direct investments, I think the current push to really improve the infrastructure, to focus spending on the gaps in terms of infrastructure will be important. That's one of the things. There's also the discipline in terms of the economic policies. And for us at the BSP, our adoption of inflation targeting, it's a data-intensive, forward-looking type of monetary policy. It provides discipline and transparency, accountability to investors. So that's our contribution in terms of supporting macroeconomic stability and thus providing a good environment both for domestic as well as our foreign investors.
In fact, the BSP has been, of course, we have seen improvements in our credit rating. And although at the beginning of this administration, we had a campaign for Road to A, where do we stand in that campaign now?
Yeah, so we remain committed to this goal. Unfortunately, there were a lot of shocks. The Ukraine-Russian war disrupted the global economy, and now we have another conflict in the Middle East, and also some of the concerns last year on infra spending. So that has affected probably the pace of our march towards having a credit rating of A. but we think we continue to have good fundamentals. So what is important really is to maintain that foundation. So for example, if you look at the banking sector, they continue to be robust and resilient across different metrics. Capital buffers are adequate, they're flush with liquidity, and they have good management, risk management practices. If you look at our external buffers, our international reserves continue again to be adequate, at least 7 months worth of imports of goods and services, and 3 times our short-term obligations. So that's enough, that's a lot of buffers for any external shocks. And again, I think at the end of the day, there will be shocks and economic performance could go up and down. But if we have good foundations, good macroeconomic frameworks, both on the monetary side and the fiscal side, then we can continue to perform well despite these shocks. So for us, it's really maintaining that discipline in monetary policy, so we will be able to adjust as needed and do the appropriate change in monetary policy.
You were the chief economist of the Department of Finance when this administration had its highest GDP at 7.6% in 2023. For the second half of the year, DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said that he's optimistic and he thinks that it'll pick up and hopefully we will reach our targets for the second half of the year. He says that we need to reach around 4.4 to be able to hit our targets. Do you share that optimism?
So right now, the first half is around 2.6% on average. And this is something that, to some extent, we expected. Some moderation adjustment in the economy because of these external shocks and spillover from what has happened in the fourth quarter last year. What is key moving forward is really this effort of the national government to catch up, to spend more moving forward. And they did actually in terms of the salaries as well as the operating expenses. Now it's the turn of the capital expenditure, the construction, that can now ramp up moving forward. So that will probably be something that we are all looking forward to in the second half and in the coming in next year.
The budget is being submitted to Congress today, and they had stated that their priorities are social services. They call it people-driven. Do you think that is the correct approach, given that you had just mentioned earlier that the second half it's time to work on capital?
Yes. So the priority of the economic team on social spending, particularly education, health, are very important. In the near term, they provide boost to our economy, but equally important, they are an investment in our people. So if you look at the strategy, effectively, what is happening is we are investing on physical capital, the infrastructure. But at the same time, we are investing in human capital. And this one will support growth not only in the near term, but also our medium to long-term prospects. And that will count a lot in terms of providing durable employment growth moving forward, even improving the distribution of income as we continue to expand the economy. The additional or the improvement in productivity will also help us in our inflation management. And at the end of the day, that could translate to a better credit rating for the Philippines. So
we are investing in our people for our sustainability. DG, for our last question. For our neighbors in Southeast Asia, Vietnam's inflation was at 4.5%. The other countries, Thailand, Indonesia, hovered around 2%, all less than 3%. What are we doing wrong, or what can we do better to be able to bring back our inflation back to target?
Yeah. Thank you, Margaux. So we are looking at these different risk factors to inflation. Some of them have materialized, some of them are forthcoming. So what is important right now really is to do the preparatory work based on these risk factors that we are seeing. El Nino seems to be one of the priorities right now. And again, as I've mentioned, the preparatory work being done by the government will be helpful. For us at the BSP, we continue to look at inflation numbers, inflation expectations moving forward. We continue to look at different scenarios that could affect inflation outlook. And every date, every meeting date on policy meeting, the Monetary Board discusses this outlook and look at different options to make sure that we continue to be disciplined and have a well-informed data-based decision in terms of monetary policy and help achieve our inflation target.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor Zeno Abenoja.
Thank you, Margaux.
Piqui Lopez welcomes with deep appreciation Ramon Ang's entry into Lopez Incorporated. Stay with us. You're watching Business 360. Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. Negotiations on the reopening on the Strait of Hormuz appear to be stalling as both sides demand compensation for damages. Iran says it will not reopen the waterway until the United States pays reparations and lifts sanctions. But U.S. President Donald Trump has turned the demand around, saying it is Iran that should pay for damage he claims it caused over the past 50 years.
They asked for reparations, you might say, or they asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. So now what is it? So if there's damages to be paid, I think Iran should pay those damages.
Global oil prices have sharply increased over uncertainty on the negotiations. Ramon Ang has taken a significant stake in the Lopez family business through a personal investment, which Piqui Lopez welcomed with deep appreciation. Che Sulit has more details.
Ultra-Bilyonaryo San Miguel Corporation Chairman Ramon Ang has bought into the Lopez family's century-old business empire. Ang acquired the 25.68% stake in Lopez Incorporated, held by Crem Investment Corporation, the holding company representing the family branch of former ABS-CBN chairman Eugenio Gabi Lopez III. The acquisition is Ang's personal investment through his wholly owned company, Illumina Investment Holdings. Piqui Lopez welcomed Ang as a longtime friend who could bring decades of business experience to the group. He called the partnership a major step toward resolving issues that have affected both the Lopez family and its businesses. Through Lopez Incorporated, Ang now holds an indirect minority interest in the group's broad portfolio across energy, property, and media. These include First Philippine Holdings, First Gen, Rockwell Land, and ABS-CBN. The deal comes after months of internal disagreements among Lopez family members over the group's management and major transactions involving First Gen. Gabi Lopez said the sale was intended to help restore peace within the family. Earlier reports from Bilyonaryo.com said the majority bloc was considering selling its combined 71% stake, but the final deal covered only the shares held by Gabi Lopez's branch. While Ang is now a major shareholder, the remaining Lopez family branches will retain majority control of the company. For Business 360, Che Sulit, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
And that's Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.